episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello, Connected Yoga Teacher friends, and welcome to episode 117 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. If you're listening in real time, maybe you have been waiting to hear part 2 with Shelly Prosko. Last week, Shelly shared cues that empower our students instead of using cues that instill fear of movement. Shelly shared so much, and this became a 2-part series because I could not cut anything out. So this episode also goes along really well with episode 114 with Diane Liska about compassion fatigue, and episode 115 with Dr. Ginger Garner, where she talked about the polyvagal theory. I strongly encourage you to go back and check out 114, 115, and if you haven't listened to 116, make sure it would just make more sense if you listen to them in order, although you could be a rebel and listen to them out of order as well. These 3 previous episodes and today's episode are all interrelated, and they tie in so well with each other. Today, we're talking with Shelly Prosko in more depth about communication and language to consider when we're working with our yoga students, especially those who are dealing with persistent pain. We don't want our yoga students to become fearful of movement, and we for sure don't want to trigger a pain response with our cues or our tone. Today, Shelly talks in more depth, as I said. She also talks about self-compassion and the importance of alignment, as well as how we can make yoga quote-unquote safe. Shelly also gives us some information about her soon-to-be-published book, Yoga and Science in Pain Care, Treating the Person in Pain. I'm super excited that you get to hear about this from her. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of 3, a yoga teacher and a trainer and consultant working for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week as you drive to the classes, workshops, and trainings that you're teaching or taking. And as you navigate the jungles of yoga entrepreneurship, because I know it's not always easy. It's not always all shavasana and relaxation and just doing some yoga. If you are looking for the links for today's show or you want more information, all of that is ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/117. And before we meet Shelly, let's hear our hot tip of the week from Blake at Schedulicity.
Hey there, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Blake with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. If you don't have a website, your Schedulicity account includes a business listing page where you can show off your services, classes, workshops, and business information. You can choose when you're ready to make your business listing public, so it will stay hidden while you're still getting set up. You can control whether or not your clients are allowed to book their appointments online, and you'll appear in Schedulicity's search results when your listing is public. If you already have your own website, you can copy and paste the code for our booking widget and allow your clients to book online without navigating away from your page. Having a strong internet presence helps take your business to the next level.
Thank you so much, Blake and Team Schedulicity. You really do make my life much easier as a yoga teacher and a podcaster because I schedule everything with Schedulicity. Yoga classes, podcast interviews, consultation calls, it's all in one spot. So Shelly Prosko does a lot of things. She's a physiotherapist, a yoga therapist, an author, an international speaker, and an educator. And she's really dedicated to this integration of yoga into modern healthcare. She has over 20 years of experience in the field, and she's also a pain care yoga trainer. Let's dive in and hear the continuation of the conversation that Shelly and I were having last week.
And then the last one is language that facilitates awareness and presence in their body, which again, I sort of already talked about, but cultivating a sense of self-compassion as well.
Yeah.
So language, and that's, I mean, I'm still learning that. It's been a few years, but I'm learning more and more about self-compassion and cultivating it. And that's a whole language in and of itself. So the way my inner voices has changed and I'm learning. And then that's, I think, why I'm pretty sure, not just I think, I can see a change in the way my teaching is or my language is when I'm teaching. And
because of your own inner...
My self-compassion practices, yes, since I've been learning more about the science surrounding self-compassion and that Yeah. So, and the book chapter that I was telling you about, I learned a lot. And so that it's hard to say, in a podcast, an episode, because it's a process, but I just would like to encourage people, if they're interested, to learn more about self-compassion and the language surrounding that. And then that will help you cue even more. And since one of my chapters was on compassion and pain care and looking at self-compassion and how that can change people's pain. So self-compassion practices for pain made me really think, wow, that's one thing we can do as yoga teachers and other practitioners. But for your audience here, the yoga teachers, we can cultivate self-compassion in our yoga classes. Like, how cool is that? And that might help people's pain. So that's the conversation around alignment, like, and all that. Like, that's so linear and not substantiated as far as pain goes. So that's what it's like, okay, yogis, let's go. Like, look at all of our tools. Like, we're some of the best people to be helping people with their pain and not in an alignment way, like in all these other aspects.
Yeah, I hear all of your, a lot of your language is about exploration, curiosity, noticing, mindfulness.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of this self-compassion if somebody wants to try on a practice?
Yeah, just a quick one. So this comes from Kristen Neff, Neff. So you can look her up and you will have all kinds of information. A lot of it's free too. So that's always fun. She's got books and articles and stuff. So she looks at self-compassion as 3 components: mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. And so mindfulness is, we all know what that is in this realm. I don't have to talk about that, but just being present and aware and non-judgmental awareness. And then kindness, so extending some sort of self-soothing or kindness towards yourself. And then the common humanity is knowing that you're not alone, so that other people share the suffering too. So quick example. So let's say you do something that you were not proud of. Maybe you just yelled at your child, or like you just said something and you just immediately regret it. So a quick moment of self-compassion could be, and this is a practice and you could take as long as you want if you need a little time out, or maybe you don't have the time, but you can, I've been practicing so much, I can go through it in my head quite quickly. So depending on how much time you have, you can take, but so you yell at your child and you're not proud of that. You made a huge mistake and it was nasty. Mean, you're being a mean.
It happens sometimes.
So you take a so the first thing that Neff would say with her self-compassion practice would be, the first thing is the moment of mindfulness, being aware. Yes, I made a mistake, and saying, I feel right now, I am feeling guilty. I feel really bad. I am in a moment of suffering. Like, you just be mindful about it. And if you want, as yogis, we could do, she doesn't do this, but I bring this in to my work. Like, you could do a little check, a scan, kosha, scan all your koshas. So just take a couple minutes. How's my breath? How does this feel in my body? Just get present and just be mindful that you're in a moment of suffering. Okay, you made a mistake and you feel bad and guilty. Common humanity. It's okay. Like, this is normal. Like, anyone else, any other mom in my shoes would have done the same thing. Like, I'm tired. I'm whatever. I did the best that I did in that situation. And like, so there's that common humanity of, you're not the only one. And that sense of community. And, we have, so that we're the whole and complete and connected.
Right.
And this Brené Brown's work, most people know her by now. And like, she just talks about, we're wired for connection. And yoga, what's yoga? Oh, the connected yoga teacher. I mean, yoga is about connection to self, to something higher, greater, to, right? Goodness. So that common humanity, you just tap into that if you can. And then kindness. So sounds pretty straightforward, but just what do you need in this moment? So you're just like, what do I need right now to be kind? What are my needs? And it might look different in every different situation. Maybe it's a bubble bath, but it could be just, I just need to say something kind. I love you. Like say I love you to yourself. Or maybe some other techniques. Not everyone's going to be different what you're comfortable with, but you can do a little hand mudra. I have some, favorites. Just feel good. Hands over your heart, one hand on your heart and the other one over, and it just feels nice. Like you're holding yourself, maybe bow your head, maybe you have a little mantra. I'm okay. Just this is enough. Just this is enough. Maybe you repeat that 5 times, whatever. Soothing. Science does say the rubbing, rhythmical movements, or rubbing your arm and kind of tactile. For some might be soothing. You got to do what's comfortable. I do this work with all kinds of different people. And not everyone is going to sit there and rub their arm.
Right. Oh, this is so good.
Yeah. So that's that. And then, so you just help people. I wrote this down. This came to mind, Shannon, as I was writing these, is as yoga teachers, you want to help people find their own luxurious experience. And one experience that I have, what I love when I'm teaching, whether it's one-on-one or in classes, when you're giving people these options and permission and how does that feel for you? And we'll try that and try that. Like you had said earlier, the example of the physio that said, what was the example?
Do you want to? Yeah, it was the knee over.
Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to? So giving those people those options. And then, what I find is that people will say oh, I love that one. They'll experience, oh, I like that way. So if you are having a warrior one, you're teaching, you're going through warrior one and you give, 3 different options for the pelvis, or you give, okay, try the knee here. And then what happens if you put it, track it over the knee? What happens if you go a little on the outer edge of the foot? Or what happens if you put a little more weight in the back foot or the front or both? What happens if you press both feet down? I mean, and you don't say this much, I'm just, what if you push down and away from one another? What if you press the feet down and towards one another? And, and then people often what will happen is they'll choose one and be like, oh, and they like that for whatever reason you wouldn't even imagine. That makes them feel strong, empowered, or that, oh, that, and they say all kinds of interesting stories. Well, that one took my headache away, pushing my foot down and away, just my headache just gone. Fill in the blank. I could, there are lots of different examples in that way. So I really like that.
Say that again. Give them a luxurious.
Yeah. Help guide. So we're the guides.
Okay.
So we are guiding people to give them an experience. So we're not giving a lesser one or a better one or a right one or a wrong one. We're just guiding people to find their own luxurious experience.
Oh, I love this because think of the amount of times that either we go to do something for our body and we think we're caring for it, and it's like torture.
Mm-hmm. Or that you loved a couple weeks ago and not right then and there is where you want to be. I'm getting pedicures and that. Often it's my time. I just sit back, get them, I like it. And then sometimes it doesn't serve me. Sometimes I don't want to be here right now. Maybe it's a stressful thing where it's not happy. I need to walk. I need to go. I need to get fresh air. I need to walk and walk and walk. And I need to ruminate. Let me ruminate. We're supposed to don't ruminate, don't catastrophize. And what I've learned about myself in the last few years is if I can give myself 15 minutes to ruminate and catastrophize and walk and go, that's self-compassion. In some cases, not. It's just learning. And I have a blog on, and I like it. If you want to share it, it's self-care, the dark side. So I talk about what self-care really means for me, and it kind of alludes a little bit to what we're talking about here. It's really about being aware of your needs, which takes time to really cultivate what your needs are in that moment, and then doing the best you can to to take care of those needs, or at least express them. Because then you hear, well, I can't, it must be nice. I've got 4 kids. I can't take, well, no, but to, express, to be able to communicate.
Yes.
As well. And not being afraid to ask for help and all those kinds of things. That's all part of self-compassion and self-care. But yes,
really interesting.
Teachers with this pain language stuff, like getting out of helping people, we as teachers, what we really want to do is get out of their way. We want to get out of people's way, in my perspective. So we're this compassionate guide, right? So let's try to get out of their way, and we're just, like I said, guiding them. And it really takes the pressure off us, I think, too, as far as learning, if we think we have to know why, what do I try to say here? Like just getting back to the alignment thing, like, well, do this so that, and then all of a sudden when you say so that, you're expected to be this expert of all the underlying mechanisms when science doesn't even know the underlying mechanisms.
Right.
Like do this, or keep the knees bent to protect your spine. Like you don't worry about the protect your spine part, like I already said a few times. But
this is really very freeing, I think, as a teacher. You're right.
Well, if you go deep into it, it actually is easier because you don't get caught up in the weeds. It's just a little hard to change the language at first if you've been taught and to say the things like to protect your knee, to protect the spine. And if you're still unsure and if it's not making sense to you, like, but you have to have the neutral spine, like that's going to be dangerous. Like there's more learning potentially on your part then that might need to be done so you can understand better. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long I could talk for 3 hours, but I mean, I can talk about that too. But I there are a couple, the language thing I wanted to talk about, if we have time. I don't know if you're interested in like what I think are the components to like safe yoga, like in quotes, sort of what it
I would love to hear about what safe yoga is, and I want to hear about your book. Tell us about your book first.
Okay. So the book is called Yoga and Science in Pain Care, Treating the Person in Pain. So I'm co-editing and co-authoring with Neil Pearson and Marlisa Sullivan, both physical therapists and yoga therapists, both professors as well, and collaborate in research. And so we've got we also have contributors. So we have other authors, experts in their fields. So the chapter, we have a combination of talking about yoga, obviously. So we've got some chapters, really nice, just introducing yoga, but also going deep into yoga and pain. And then we're talking about the science surrounding pain. So it's really great for the yoga teacher. We have a couple chapters on pain biology. And
wow.
that's palpable, tangible, accessible. So we're really, nothing like this has been done. This is the first of its kind, I will say. And then, so that after the couple chapters on pain biology, central sensitization, things like that, then we go into, breath and pain, like pranayama and pain, basically the 8 limbs and the koshas. We go through psycho-emotional aspects of pain, yoga for grief. We have Antonio Saus's yoga for grief relief, Michael Lee talking about transformational learning and in yoga for pain. And Marlisa, one of her chapters it's the last one. I love it. It's on social engagement and eudaimonic well-being for people in pain and all the research that goes around that and how important that is. So social engagement, thriving, steadfast joy instead of fleeting sort of, happiness kind of thing. And that is, and then, like I said, it's like all pertaining to helping people in pain and helping us yoga practitioners and healthcare practitioners help people in pain better.
I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, and my chapter on compassion. So compassion and pain care. And I know I'm missing some key ones in there, but that's sort of it. Oh, then awareness. We have a whole chapter on pratyahara. Laurie Rubenstein-Fazio, professor and physical therapist, yoga therapist. Yeah, I edited that one for her. Like we divvied up our editing for each chapter. And so that's phenomenal. You're going to love that one. Yeah. All of them. It's good. It's a good book. Okay. So how are we doing for time?
Let's do, here's the next thing that I have to do today. I have to go and paint with 18 people at school.
Oh,
I'm not guiding the painting. I'm just organizing pizza.
Oh, so you get to be directive.
I do. But
okay.
Let's see if we can do it. Do you think we can do it in a short amount of time?
Yeah. Okay. I will try to keep this brief. So safe yoga. So this is just my perspective. These are some points I put down because I talk about this a lot and people ask this a lot, right? Because they think, well, if it's not alignment. And so I think the first thing is creating a safe space. We talk about that a lot and looking at a safe that's inclusive, nonviolent. And I think the big question there is, well, how do you create a safe space? We talk about that a lot, but how do you do it? So that's something we can all work on together. But I think starting with, Chantal had mentioned this actually, I really like this in the podcast, starting out by just asking if we can ask. It's huge, right? So just requesting feedback and not just requesting it, but accepting it and just knowing how you respond, when you're getting feedback and looking at that. So I really liked that from Chantal. But listening to learn and to understand. So listen to everybody around you, to your students. Give permission and options. And then I think a big thing about a safe space is check our own state. So our own physiological state and our own judgments, our own biases, and doing our own inner work, I think is important. And that'll just reflect in creating a safe space. I think language to cultivate awareness and presence. So we've said some of that, and keeping the students in their experience. So if we can keep people aware and present and in their bodies or in all their koshas and help with centering at the beginning, I think that will help prevent injuries. Because we know injuries can happen when you're not present and mindful, especially in transitions in and out of poses. We know injuries can happen when there's lack of awareness. So when we're
maybe if we're like starting to tell some story that relates nothing to their body. Right.
Exactly. We know injuries can happen when we're fatigued. We know science tells us this. When we're stressed, because our sympathetic nervous system might be driving. So we breathe differently, we move differently. So the tension, we might have more muscle tension, altered motor recruitment patterns, things like that. So that can affect the whole body and even how the joints, like the different stability of the joints. So stress can be a factor in injuries. And in fact, that's a lot of the research says that with athletes. And then also ego, or like being attached to our goals. So if you're looking at the intention of the pose, so if you've got this certain goal in your mind, sometimes injury can be that. So that's where this unbridled pursuit of the pose can be dangerous. So creating awareness and presence, I think, is important. Language that cultivates exploration. We've talked about that already. So you have this curiosity of your own your own experience. So we're the guide. I think that helps to create safe yoga. And language that supports options and permission. So you're creating a very genuine tone as well. So it's not just the words you're saying, but the tone that you're saying and the whole space and environment. So that could be a longer conversation, but that is part of safe yoga. And then slow down. So you had mentioned this, and I do think that's valuable. So slowing down, especially in those transitions. So mindful transitions, reminding people that the transition is part of yoga. It's part of the pose.
Right.
So we're not going this pose and then this, right? It's because a lot of injuries happen in between there. So I think that's important for safe yoga. Common sense. So just at end ranges. So the body at certain end ranges. We haven't gotten into that whole discussion yet on tissue adaptability and load and things like that. But just using your common sense. If you are teaching certain poses that are at the end ranges, like a full wheel pose, or maybe you're in shoulder stand and your neck is in full flexion, and using your common sense. Like you're not just saying, oh, well, just do whatever you want. Like turn your head if you're in full shoulder stand, or
right.
Let's do handstand, or let's do a headstand on your third eye. So just using common sense at end ranges and or inversions if you're doing inversions, and knowing those things like blood pressure, high blood pressure, or glaucoma, like just certain things, so that I think contributes to safe yoga. And language that's in line with the body's robustness, resiliency, language that's empowering, that you're whole, you're connected. I think that can make yoga safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 I really like that.
And then two more, keeping ourselves. So as the teacher, I said this already, but these are just my summary points. So keeping ourselves as the teacher really present and aware, and we're acting and guiding from what I like to say, from a sacred space, or from, your clear space, from your yogic space, whatever that means to you. And that, so we maybe should, and maybe we do this, but think about our state before we come in. I'm sure most of us do like a little centering or meditation, but just checking your, like I said, your biases and what's going on in your body. When you have a whole class and you see that one person that maybe you don't, maybe you've had some conflict with from some of the things maybe that they've told you in the past, and then you see them in this certain position that, you could probably correct what you've been trained, like 10 or 12 different things. Like, just everything is, what's your breath like? How are you feeling? So just that's part of our practice, I think, as yoga, to create a safe yoga practice for our students, is checking in with ourselves. And then self-compassion, which I've talked about already. So let's have fun with this, not overwhelming anybody. Let's make mistakes. And we're not surgeons, and we're not like airline pilots. Like, nobody's life is in danger here. So we have to remember, right? We're okay. Like, we're more than okay. We're doing phenomenal service. So language, one more, I have so much that I just want to say thank you for being if I want to listen to this one, listen to me. But this language, I had this thought. It was part of one of the workshops I do on the three diaphragms of health: the vocal diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm, and the pelvic diaphragm. So the vocal, like language, our voice, is so important. It's obviously the foundation of communication, right? Because we're talking this, we want to maintain language. So we want to talk about language here in this podcast. So I was like, well, language. What is language? Language is obviously the way we communicate. So with our words, so we have to choose the words we use. Okay, yeah. But the tone and the pacing too.
Mm-hmm.
Tone, we've talked a little bit about that, but are we condescending? Is it a condescending tone? So the words might be great, but what is the tone behind it? Are we speaking with an upspeak all the time? Do we speak like this the whole class? That would be irritating, and that might people's nervous systems. And I have a sense that because I'm on this podcast and I'm trying to get a bunch in, and I'm excited that this feels maybe a little sympathetic for some people, like nervous system, that are listening. So I don't teach this way, right? Like, you want to, watch the pace of the voice.
Yes.
Research shows people that speak with a higher tone and speak really fast, it shows that we trust them, less, and the nervous, there's more stress. So if we can speak with a little bit more grounded tone and a better pace. Now, you don't want to be monotone either.
Right.
Inflections are fine. And anyways, that's a whole other podcast with voice and stuff. But I think all yoga teachers, I think in yoga teacher training, 200-hour, there should be a section on voice, because it's key to when we teach it, you're using your voice to teach. It's so important.
Yeah.
And you don't get, I don't think, maybe some do, but some teacher trainings actually we do. And then the other way to communicate is our body. So we've got verbal, but then also our body. So as a yoga teacher, our posture movements, the position we're in the room could change. So sometimes getting maybe away from the front, or if you're offering people to use a wall, you might go to the wall, but then if you ever notice, some people, they'll go to the opposite wall because they don't want to be by the teacher with you, even though intention. I want to go to the wall to, hey, come on, guys, let's make a community, come up to the wall. But then I realized, a lot of people don't want to do that because then all eyes are on them because they're with the teacher.
Right.
Noticing positioning and stuff. And your facial expression, eye contact as well. So we've got polyvagal theory. Can't get into that right now, but your face, your eyes, everything is telling. So not that we're artificially trying to make our face move in a certain way, which brings me to my very last point. It's our intention. So what's the energy behind it all? So if our intention, if we have a certain amount of knowledge and understanding, and then our intention is, compassionate, respectful, loving, which is seeing the other people as legitimate human beings, obviously. But, if we really can cultivate that, then our facial expressions and eye contact, that'll take care of itself. So I'm not talking about us willfully.
Like changing it.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying. Our facial expressions and our eyes and everything are a way of communicating, and our breath as well, because our breath also influences our voice. So if we can, look at our breath and regulate that can also change our voice, which can then change the way we're communicating. And we're trying to keep it on topic here about pain language. And being,
you brought something in though. I hadn't thought of all of the other ways we communicate through language. Like I was only thinking of cues, but you've brought in so many other ways that we do communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right that the intention is underneath that.
It is. Well, that's the yoga philosophy, right? Where it starts with intention and sankalpa, and it starts with the intention, and then where our intention flows. Or what's a sutra, isn't it? Where the intention goes, the energy flows.
Right.
Yeah, and from what I understand, historically in yoga, when asanas were first sort of coming onto the scene, I'm talking, and this is just what I've heard. I'm not a yoga scholar, but I've heard that the asanas, they were first there was an intention. And then you visualized. So what's your intention behind this? So this, okay, we're going to do warrior one study. And I'm sure you do this too, and many yoga teachers. I always like to set an intention before class, and I invite all the class to set their own intention. And then sometimes during the class, I'll have them revisit their intention. I'll keep reminding them. No one tells it what it is, and then at the end of class, I'll say, and then you can hold on to your intention for the rest of the day, or maybe let it go if you want. I got that from a yoga teacher, Carol Foy. But asana classically, from, like I said, what I understand, before every asana, you would set your intention for the asana, and then you would visualize it first. So you don't even do it. You visualize it, and then you perform it. And I could just keep talking forever. I love this. We know this we've known this for decades, visualization and the power of intention and visualizing we use it in sports psychology with athletes. We use it in neuro rehab. When I did rotations in neuro rehab and with our stroke patients, and we're using a lot of visualization because that it lights up or stimulates the premotor cortex, and you're already something like 30% of the neurons are already firing with visualization. So that super motor imagery we use it in physiotherapy for decades. We've used it. So, that's a little different than intention, but it's still the intention comes first, the imagery.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all of it behind it in the brain. Oh my gosh. Our listeners will not be upset at all that I'm really impressed. You were super organized for this and you had so many points. I am. You fit in more than you could write a book on this podcast episode.
I think so. Well, it's because I finished. We submitted the manuscript, so I had cleared my schedule, so I have more free time. So I'm like, okay, I got this podcast. We're going to talk about pain language.
Oh my gosh.
I was actually just went for a walk, and I was thinking some thoughts. And then I had so many points come to mind that I was like, I have to write this down. And then I started writing down some points, and then it just, the rabbit hole, I was like, And we didn't even talk about like alignment and when it matters, why we cue alignment in yoga. I could probably do it in 2 minutes, but
I have to go paint soon.
you have to go. We can do it for another. So we'll leave people
We
in
need to leave that and have you come back.
alignment. Yeah. So alignment is important. That's, as I say, I'm not IQ,
You're not saying
not for injury prevention. And there, we don't have the science to support that.
Tell us. I can't not know now.
And not for pain. Well, I believe we teach alignment in yoga poses potentially for many different reasons. One could be just to help cultivate body awareness skills. So help cultivate getting inside your body, right? Interoception, proprioception, kinesthetic awareness, right? So if we
again, like the curiosity and exploring.
Yeah, it just helps us, and it helps us get present, to pay attention, which can be super beneficial. All you got to do is go back to your first yoga class, or think of beginners. So when you have someone come to the yoga class for the very first time, and think of what do you want to think of? Think of a warrior one, and they're like they have no clue the need. So yeah, cue alignment, so that, because you're helping them pay attention to the body, be focused. And the focus, we know from research, help to cultivate focus and concentration, changes the brain. It improves executive functioning, self-regulation. There's a lot of value. This dhyana, right? This, you're trying to get people into this state. So perfect. And then also optimizing any kind of efficiency of the intention of the pose. So like for performance or efficiency. So if you want more power or production or force with the least amount of energy or effort, some alignment might be better than others. Does that make sense?
That does. Oh my gosh, I love that.
So biomechanical efficiency, energetic efficiency. So again, let's take the beginner who's in Warrior 2, their knees falling in, it's way over the toes, their shoulders are up to their ears, they're hunched over in a thoracic kyphosis, their chin's poking out, and you're thinking, and we know intuitively, and you can see them struggling in their breath, and we know intuitively, like, that's not easeful. But the reason why we might want to cue all those other things, I won't go through each one of them, but like opposite to what I just said, it's not for safety. That person's not harming it's not dangerous. It's not, and we don't, and this isn't me saying this, the literature, the biomechanic literature doesn't support that pain is correlated with these things. Under high loads and other certain cases, maybe like repetition beyond your tissue's ability to adapt to the load. So if you're not paying attention to the body, if you're not paying attention to the pain, so if you're in these kind of funny, what we would say as yoga teachers, a funny looking Warrior 3 with all the stuff I just said, and you're really going to end-to-end range knee valgus, like the knee's really falling into, and it's pain, it's causing pain in the person's ankle, medial ankle and knee, that's different. Yeah, the tissue's not able to adapt. But if there's no pain and the person's aware and it's okay, we want to be in all those different ranges, valgus, varus, and you can train, and the body, the tissues do adapt to load, but they have a finite ability to adapt. So there are cases absolutely when they only adapt to a certain point, and then you break that threshold, and then that's when you can have repetitive strain injuries. But I think that energetic efficiency for alignment as well, we can look at maybe the mystical, like we don't really know, like prana and chi. So right. I think in your mind, just to get that position of that warrior 2 position of the hunch, like just think of the shoulders up, what I had said, and the knee. And if you just look at the other position that we think, it's like, like the clouds open. It's just, it's this prana. Maybe it helps energy flow more in prana. And then the last 2 is just the possibility cueing alignment might influence mental and emotional states as well. And we do have research showing that certain postures or positions can influence your emotions.
Right. Like power poses.
Yeah. And again, just sticking to that one Warrior 2. So if that person is in that certain hunched over or whatever position and you change it and they feel more open, the heart's open, chakra, maybe you want to talk about chakras, and that makes them feel different emotionally, then it's good. But that might not necessarily be like that for everybody. So anyways, there's that. But I think alignment, we also might want to cue just to provide people with variable experiences. So especially in your classes where you've been teaching for a while and everyone's used to the same alignment and you're nodding your head, and I'm sure lots of you listeners do this too, we vary it up. So let's try it with the toe turned in, let's try. And that's the fun part and how you can help prevent burnout too in yoga teachers. Let's cue alignment, but let's cue it to give them a variable experience. And so for newbies, getting them to, trying to guide them to maybe try a different experience in alignment, that they don't even have a clue most of the time where, their knee is or whatever. So just providing them with a different experience. And I think that's all. I did it. I think
that's amazing. I'm so glad that you expanded on that.
That one I've talked about before in a few other podcasts.
Because I feel like you just took it full circle. Like we know that yoga has alignment. We want to look after the safety, but you've talked about like safety around language and the space and our own inner practice as a teacher. And then, yes, alignment still has a place, but let's just look at what it's offering.
So I hope, like, I tried to make it very like, this is some language that we can avoid. And then also what could we do? And then here's what I think are the ingredients for safe yoga. And then here's why alignment is still important. So,
is there any way that you could take a little snapshot of your notes so my show notes writer could?
Sure. There's no way. Right now, for all the listeners.
So yoga teachers, I'm looking at this and I can't read it.
No, there's no way. You talk to any of my friends from university, I've got a weird, I don't know. Because I just jot down stuff. And then it goes in corners and then I just jot it and then it just keeps going and a little rabbit hole. And then it's just weird. And then I think of always transferring it to a fresh sheet. But what happens is my brain is this is how my brain was thinking.
Yes.
To explain this in words, but this is how my brain was thinking. So I know this, it's like I have a relationship with it and I feel it and I breathe it. And so if I put it on another paper, it's like, it's not my thinking process. It's like a fake structure. It's like, that wasn't how I was thinking. This is how I was thinking.
Oh, I love it. Well, I am so glad that you jotted this down and shared this with us today.
I am too. I had fun. This is fun. I hope it's usable for a lot of people. And we'll have to turn this chicken scratch into a book maybe.
Yeah, that's a book right there. That's what it is.
Okay, I hope you're not late.
I will be fashionably late, but let's tell our listeners where they can find out more about you. Like, what is the best website for them to go to if they're like, I want to learn more, I want to see more videos, I just want to take in more of Shelly's amazingness?
I think just go to my website, physioyoga.ca. So physio, the full PHYSIOYOGA, yoga.ca. And then you have all my social media links on my website and my YouTube channel, and you can contact me on there as well.
Okay, great. And I will make sure to put the link to that in our show notes. And when I have information about the book, you better believe I'll be talking about it. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thanks everybody for listening. And I love everybody. And I hope I didn't ramp up people's nervous systems. I got a little bit excited.
They'll just be excited too. Thank you so much, Shelly.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well-connected yoga teachers, I would love to hear from you. What are your key takeaways from today's episode with Shelly? Or let's continue the conversation about all 4 of these episodes, all the way back from episode 114, 115, last week with 116, and this week with 117. What are your thoughts on compassion fatigue, the polyvagal theory, anything the nervous system that this brought up for you, the language and the cues that we use, and how we can really serve our students who are dealing with persistent pain? There are a couple of ways that you can continue the conversation. For sure, you can always post a comment in our show notes. This one's at theconnectedyogateacher.com/117. Or join our Monday live Q&A call. You can find out more about that on our website under events. This is where we continue the conversation, and you're welcome to ask any and all questions about the business of yoga, teaching yoga, anything I can help you with. I am happy to answer. Anything that I can't answer, I'll try and find someone who can. Those Q&A calls are free, and they are a great way for us to connect weekly in real live time, because as you know, I record the podcast ahead of time. Speaking of when this podcast goes out, it is getting near the end of May if you're listening in real time. And here where I live, this gets to be really exciting times. I'm out in the garden a lot more. We kind of have this set rule that around May the 24th, we can put things out affected by frost. Now, we have been known to have frost as late as June the 6th here where I live in Ontario. So it's not always a for sure thing, but it is exciting times. And if you want to follow along with my garden story, I try and post on my Instagram stories about that. If you would like to meet in person, I am going to be in Meaford, Ontario, sharing a training all about yoga for pelvic health, specifically for yoga teachers. That's November 2nd and the 3rd. You can find out more under trainings on our website. A shout out of thanks to Gretchen from the United States who wrote a review. Gretchen says, I've thought about writing a review for a while, and to be frank, I didn't think I had the right words to share. I didn't know how to thank Shannon for creating this space via podcast and on Facebook, sharing incredibly valuable information and facilitating so much inspiration. Her insight and the insight of her guests is invaluable. I love how I learn something unexpected on each episode. The podcast and Facebook group helps me as an independent yoga teacher to feel connected. Thank you, Shannon. Gretchen. Thank you so much, Gretchen. I love that you took the time to write a review. I know that sometimes I can be an avid podcast fan and just be listening and thinking this is great and not leaving a review. So if you're one of those people and you haven't left a review, I would love to hear from you, and you might hear it on the podcast. Thank you to our Connected Yoga Teacher team, Samantha, Suzanne, Crunch, and Cindy, for making today's episode possible and for doing amazing work in this world. Our team is truly amazing. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, it's time for me to sign off and probably go out to the garden. So I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected, either to yourself, your yoga practice, or to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?